we see methanol and other alcohol-based fuels as a viable option for the future. We still need that engine as we design it to be agnostic and be flexible into what that engine can burn. Looking at key applications like tug, offshore, and other, kind of workboat type of applications is really where we're seeing this as well.
This is Greg Trotline with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Will Watson, Marine Product Manager, Caterpillar, to discuss the latest trends in maritime electrification.
Yeah, so just a quick background from me. I'm a marine engineer and graduated from Mass Maritime. So have been at Caterpillar for about 28 years. And most of the scope of my tenure at Caterpillar, I've been part of our marine organization and our oil and gas organization, and done various roles from just field follow of engines in the early days to product development, to commercial and account management roles as well too. And then currently for the last several years, I've been in charge of our overall Cat Marine product portfolio. Yeah.
Caterpillar is obviously a main player in the maritime power sector. So, can you put in perspective the reality that's in this energy transition in the space today? Specifically, where are we on the maturity curve? How pervasive are the discussions that you're having on hybrid solutions and electrification?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Greg, I mean, this is probably no time like it in the maritime industry. What is going on today, which is seeing just completely the the open mindedness, the of what the opportunity could be and look like, and then obviously the uncertainty that goes along with that, and most people not knowing exactly which direction we're headed. So a lot of conversations we're having with people is just around that. What is the possibilities that we could have and could see? What are the realities of the various technologies? What are the stages that the maturity levels of the different technologies that exist? And it ranges everything from, you know, what could still be, what could we still get out of the combustion engine, right? I mean, there was talk maybe a couple years back that, oh, maybe the engine is in the last of its time, right? And you get into deeper conversations and it's like, no, it's that engine still has a long life to give. And what if we rethink the types of fuels that are burnt inside of that engine? Here's what those possibilities could be before jumping and leaping off into some other types of technology. Other industries have been going through different cycles, and we've had different advancements. So within the walls of Caterpillar, if you look at the on-road or the off-road industries, the land-based power industries, and other industries that we serve, right? They're at different phases as well too, and I can bring that into the discussions that are going on in the maritime industry as well.
How does all that experience in other transport sectors kind of play into the maritime package? And really, I mean, you're like you said, you're going to clients, you're talking about Caterpillar as a whole, but what can you just kind of put in perspective the power that brings to you?
Yeah, so we're able to, tap. I'm able to tap into our broader investments that we're doing in R&D across various different industries. And it's amazing because I mean we've got different industries looking at different solutions, and we as we look at one particular solution within marine, I know that my peers, product managers in other industries, are working on other solutions. So we in the marine world have been investing heavily into methanol as a fuel for engines. My peers on the land-based side have been looking at hydrogen, for example. So as they continue to work in advance hydrogen as a fuel for land-based particular applications, and I look at you know uh, methanol or alcohol-based fuels, you know we down the road can look and say, okay, well, what are we, what's happening in your industry? Is our industry moving in one direction or another? Is their industry moving in one direction or another? And you start to leverage some of those investments that are happening across the broader base of Caterpillar. The digital world, as you mentioned, is exploding. And what are we learning from connecting assets? As we connect full blown machines on the different industry sides of Caterpillar. What does that do, and what can we carry over into connectivity and digitalization in the maritime world? So yeah, it's a luxury that I thoroughly enjoy having, which is multiple different industries, multiple different investments happening across Caterpillar Inc. that we can then bring into the marine industry.
As you know, every ship, every fleet is different. And as you know, each maritime project presents its own unique challenges. But for a boat owner who's watching, who's not yet taken the dip into the hybrid electric scene, what's the
Hmm.
first best step to take really to determine if it could be the right approach for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the first steps that we have and discuss with the customers is really around what goal or objective are you really after, right? And so, are you really after a goal or an objective to improve your operating costs or your total cost of ownership over a period of time? Are you after hitting certain emissions or regulatory requirements? Are you after trying to be able to bid on a tender for certain that have certain requirements and so forth? I think it really comes around understanding that initial why. Why would you ultimately want to do something different than you're doing today, right? And what's that driver behind it? Because then you can kind of backtrack from there. Okay, here's possible steps then to achieve the goals that you're actually going after. Because again, I mean, as you're if you're really looking at operating costs, then let's look at, okay, what is your operating profile? Where do you spend most of your money, and most of your money usually is in fuel costs. Like, okay, what does that what does that look like? And what if we did these various different technology changes, and here's what this could do to improve those various costs, and then similar on emissions front. Okay, well, here's what's your operating profile, what does your emissions look like under these conditions, and then okay, what can we ultimately do if you truly want to lower those emissions? So it really comes down to starting off with what is your goals, and then taking the conversation from there, and then talking about the different solutions that you can possibly have to meet those goals.
You segued perfectly because cost obviously for any business is a driver. Now, and again, going back to every project different, every vessel is different. But from your experience, when you look at the capex and the opex differences of a hybrid electric system versus traditional diesel power, how do you generally explain it, or what do you say to ship vessel owners?
Yeah, so it's about payback period, right? So again, if your goals are to have a best operating cost, um, or best emissions and so forth, it's like, okay, well, what's that payback look like? And then just understanding that I mean, yeah, on the spectrum, you've got today's installations or more conventional installations of engines, and whether you're burning different fuels, obviously those different fuels come with some costs associated with them. You start to, as you move to the spectrum of the next, say, higher cost technology, it becomes a hybrid system. And so now I'm going to introduce, batteries, for example, and you have your traditional engine set up, and then an electrified drive system that goes along with that. You're able to kind of manage the size of batteries down manageably if you still have combustion engines in your setup. And then you're going to, let's say a more of a higher cost, initial cost setup with it that has all, say, energy storage and batteries, and you're going to have, a lot of it to to replace some engines, and it really comes down to, okay, then back to this conversation that we have with the goal you're trying to achieve, and then what does your payback period look like, and understanding the trade-offs, right? Because if you are getting a true payback, by going to add, hybridization, let's say, to the design, and you're going to see those savings in fuel, great. You'll see it, and it will make sense, and you want to move forward. If you're seeing, an emissions advantage, and now you're able to, operate. I mean, sometimes that's a requirement to operate in a certain area. So you may not have a choice but to meet those emissions levels in order to operate, and you can see, what the costs are for that, associated as well too, and then make your decision there. But certainly, with this technology comes a cost, associated with that, right? And again, our what we're trying to do is minimize that cost, and show them the options.
Well, and again, I know the main theme of this interview is we're talking about hybrid electrical, and you've already mentioned it in talking about some of the other industries that you serve. But where is Caterpillar in the development of dual fuel engines for maritime?
So we've done a lot of work and a lot of discussions, with our customer base around, applications for high speed engines, and we see in the maritime world really, if you get beyond, I'd say, variants of diesel fuels today, and there's replacements like HVO and other things. But if you really start to look at a different fuel beyond, the fuels that are available today, we see, methanol and other alcohol-based fuels as a viable, option for the future. Just really from a liquid fuel, from how do you bring it on board, store it, it seems like that is a logical pathway, moving forward. And I think the thing that we're really trying to take into consideration, though, is we still need that engine, that as we design it, to be agnostic and be flexible into what that engine can burn, because it may come out and, eventually, start as burning diesel. It may move into burning HVO, but then we need to be able to say, hey, you can still take that engine in the future and burn an alcohol-based fuel in it as well too, right? So just that, giving that flexibility to the customer, because they don't really know, and sometimes it's going to come down to, what fuel is available, right, too. And so we've, as we talk to customers, is as much as we're trying to be flexible with our engine design, we're talking to them about, hey, be flexible with your vessel design, because you're going to want to, be able to maybe migrate between different fuels in the future, and certainly you have to have that proactiveness, up front, in order to do that. So we've been doing again, like I mentioned, that our dual fuel and work has been in that um, methanol front, right? I mean, certainly looking at key applications, like tug and, offshore and other, kind of workboat, type of applications, is really where we're seeing this as well. So that's really where our focus is. I mean, I think, it's probably still to be determined, like, if that's truly what, the market goes and the industry goes towards. But certainly, from all our discussions, that's where we see it headed.
From a marine design and technical point of view, for the designer, for the builder, for the owner, I guess what are the major points of consideration that are different or unique to hybrid electric versus straight diesel engine installation and operation?
Yeah, so it's a lot of it is, back to just trying to be flexible, trying to have a design that you can, um, retrofit within the life period of that vessel, right? So certainly different segments have different design lives. But we see a lot of people that have different designs, and they want 20, 30 years plus and plus in some other segments, around that vessel. And then you think about the design flexibility that you want to put into it so that that vessel can live over that period of time. I do say that as we look at new vessel design versus retrofit, of existing designs today, you start to say, okay, well, how can I add battery, or how can I do things to existing design? And that's tough, right? So how can you build into that, future to say, okay, how would I, maybe not today, but in the future, add battery, right? Where would I put that? Well, how would I put that, in the engine room, or is there space up on deck that I'd have to put it up on deck, top side, and what kind of designs does that factor into it? And if I want different fuels, do I have the tanks, and do I have everything set up to accept those different fuels? I mean, these are the conversations that again cause a lot of anxiety. I'd say with people that are building a boat in the future, to say, oh shoot, did I consider this, and what would I have to, what would I do, and do I have space? And certainly, as we work with vessel designers around the globe, I mean, those are real challenges. And okay, if I was to remove an engine and replace it with battery, how much battery could I actually fit in? And it's like, oh wait, well, a battery of today would be this. What's the battery of the future? What's that power density look like? And you're starting to try to give different factors in there to play things out. But it's really down to just trying to be flexible, and trying to work with a design that allows you some flexibility to grow. Otherwise, you'll be hamstrung really on what you can do with that vessel, in the future, right? So sure.
Can you discuss in depth one or two projects that Caterpillar's been involved in, something that really illustrates the scope of the possibilities?
Yeah, so let me probably back to the dual fuel project here. And so as we've announced a partnership with Damen, and really going after kind of that first installation of our 3500 series engine that will operate on that dual fuel for with methanol. And this has been a great collaboration. We're learning together, both from a vessel design perspective, a technology perspective of the engine, and what it will be capable of. Obviously, the operating characteristics, how to operate a tug, using dual fuel. So there's a good partnership between Caterpillar and Damen on us ultimately landing on the water, that first engine that's going to be running on dual fuel here. So yeah, that's one that again that we've been working through and learning together, and it shows just a great way that to collaborate and learn together.